chaos, outrage, and a demand for change unfolding right now on the streets of Belarus. Thousands of demonstrators marching through the capital city of Minsk today, calling for a fair election and deeming last week's vote totally rigged. Over the last week, officials say nearly 7,000 people have been arrested. And just today, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, echoing those protesters, saying the elections were, quote, weren't free and weren't fair. That from Pompeo. CNN's Fred Pleitgen is joining us live from Minsk right now. Fred, these protesters are taking a real risk right now. Update our viewers on the very latest, because it's awful what we're seeing.
You're absolutely right, Wolf. It certainly is awful, and these people are risking a lot, and it certainly does take a lot of courage as well. One of the things we have to keep in mind, Wolf, is that Belarus is one of the most repressive countries in the world, and Alexander Lukashenko, who's ruled this country with an iron fist for about a quarter century, he's one of the most repressive leaders in the world. And as you mentioned, thousands of people have already been arrested, and a lot of those people have been beaten while they were in detention. There were people who came to us and told us about torture while they were in detention, beatings, people being crammed into cells, put into stressed positions, women being forced to strip, being forced to kneel on the ground, and then some of these protesters actually being paraded on state TV. So a lot of people extremely angry. And despite all these repressions, people are still coming out by the tens of thousands into the streets. And it seems to us, Wolf, as though the crowds are actually swelling. There's more people coming out, and it seems as though a lot of people have lost their fear. Now, Lukashenko still claims that he won the election, getting about 80% of the vote. And he, at this point in time, doesn't show any signs of wanting to step down. In fact, he had a big phone call with Vladimir Putin of Russia today, but the opposition says that's not happening. They're still calling for him to resign. They want new elections, and they certainly want all this violence by the government authorities to end. They did score a few victories over the past couple of days. In fact, yesterday we were on hand when they went to the Parliament building. The riot police came out. Everybody thought that there was going to be beatings that were going to take place, but the riot police then actually put down their shields and people embraced there. It's still a long way to go in Belarus. However, right now you can feel some momentum with the opposition. They've called for big protests to take place tomorrow again, and also called for a general strike that's supposed to take place on Monday here in Belarus. Some pretty big events, and you're absolutely right, Wolf. A lot of courage by the people here. They tell us, everybody that we speak to is tell, look, we are very much afraid for what could happen to us, but they also believe that if they don't come out now and demand change might not happen at all in this country, Wolf.
Yeah, we, of course, salute all those people. And we, of course, salute all the journalists, including you, who are taking a big chance reporting on what's going on right now. Be careful over there. Fred Pleitgen joining us from Minsk. Thanks for that report. Let's continue our analysis right now. Samantha Vinograd is joining us. She's a CNN national security analyst. She served on the National Security Council during the Obama administration. Sam, thanks so much for joining us. It seems like a long time ago, but I remember when I was in Minsk back at the end of 1991, early 1992. There I am doing a stand-up. I was CNN's military affairs correspondent. I had gone there for the first meeting of the Commonwealth of Independent States, the former republics of the Soviet Union, which had just collapsed. And we saw protests, we saw the unrest, the end of the Cold War. It seemed a time of such great optimism, but now all these years later, almost 30 years later, Sam, we're seeing an authoritarian leader, people desperate for real democracy. It's an awful, as I said, awful situation unfolding in Belarus right now. What do you make of all of this?
Well, first off, Wolf, you haven't changed a bit since that live shot. But in terms of what's happening on the ground in Belarus, as you mentioned, this is a horrifying situation. That said, anybody that has followed the course of history in Belarus under Lukashenko isn't overly surprised by the fact that he rigged this election, nor are we surprised by what he's doing vis-a-vis peaceful protesters. Something has changed this time around, however, and that's the role of the United States. Under previous administrations, the United States used to be a champion for democracy. That was largely based upon our credibility and the fact that other countries believed that we practiced what we were preaching. This time around, frankly, the United States doesn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to urging authoritarian leaders to protect democratic freedoms like the right to peacefully protest or to have a free and fair election. Based on that, when it comes to protecting democracy, there is a gaping hole where the United States used to be. And that really exposes peaceful protesters and democracy more generally to more assaults because the United States is not there to credibly defend them.
Is the president missing a real opportunity, Sam, right now, by not speaking out personally, more publicly in support of these protesters? At least the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has.
Well, President Trump's statement on this just wouldn't pass the laugh test. It would be a waste of airtime. The president making a statement on promoting democracy in Belarus would just be an exercise in hypocrisy. What should be happening now is the United States should be working with EU member states to try to figure out punitive measures to put on the table to try to change Lukashenko's thought calculus. Now, the United States could implement unilateral moves like sanctions under the Global Magnitsky Act, for example, or it could work to really push, again, the EU member states who have a much larger trading relationship with Belarus to issue sanctions against Lukashenko and other officials involved in this exercise. It is important to keep in mind that there's an additional player on the playing field, and that's Vladimir Putin. As our colleague Fred Pleitgen just mentioned, Lukashenko and Putin reportedly had a call today. Putin appears to be siding with Lukashenko, and that's going to likely factor into President Trump's calculus here. We know that he doesn't often like to get crosswise with Putin, so when it comes to the United States working behind the scenes trying to change the situation, President Trump may be reticent to do much of anything if, it risks getting crosswise with Vladimir Putin.
That's an important point as well. Samantha Vinograd, as usual, thank you so much for joining us.